Hi, I am Alisha Ahmed. My pronouns are she, they. The constant guest is going to be the next couple of hours spent together. To begin with, who's this person who's here and you've decided to spend 2 hours with? Hi, that's me. My name is Alisha, and I am of Italian and Egyptian heritage. I live here in Wales and I consider myself Welsh because I became British in Wales. I'm a fat, queer, non-binary, autistic immigrant. My accent will always give that away. It's fine. I live with it by now. In my day life, I am an intersectionality educator at Peter Cymru, which is the organization, the grassroots organization by and for queer people of color in Wales. We are your version of Black Pride. I also happen to identify as a pagan witch, and I am a spoken word artist and diarist. And that's basically the main stuff that I'm gonna go through today with you. I also live in Wales. I've been living in Wales for like 6 years, and in the corner there, you see my amazing spouse, Raven, and I live here in Wales with my 2 cats as well, which are Twa and Stella. So cats, cats, cats. So I really liked the definition of necessity is the mother of invention because, yeah, I think most of what I've done and I will share with you today comes from that. That's a list of things where I've performed my journals and spoken word poetry yet, because apparently it's a thing that you do. If you're an artist, you prove somehow in weird ways. I don't know if it counts, but that's the stuff that I've done in the last couple of years because I haven't shared my practice before. There's also a good chance that if by any reason you should believe that I actually have an aptitude to talk, that comes from the fact that I am a YouTube content creator. I've been for the last 14 years. You have my contacts in place where to find me there, and possibly that might have helped with public speaking. However, as I was mentioning before we started to Africa and Carrie-Anne, I will learn to talk with people and not at people. The camera didn't help me with that. So, on the point of what we're doing here at today, my practice is a transformation in a way, or an evolution of my diaries, my journals that I've kept since 95. I unfortunately just have tracks since 2000 onwards because they weren't digital before. Also, one thing that I've expressed most recently, sometimes either in the way that I speak or in the way that I write, people have this thing of believing that I'm somewhat eloquent. I'm dyslexic, so I don't read that much. So if you believe that to be well read is mandatory to do anything that has to do with writing, it's not necessarily the case. There are other ways to learn. Also, because I was born and raised in Italy, my native language is Italian, which is a Neo-Latin language. So a lot of times, if I don't know a word in English, I will try and chance it to go to the closest Latin word and make it Englishized if it sounds all right. Lament is one of those words for me. I always very often use it, even if it's not necessarily that used in the English language, because it's the natural translation for what the word is in Italian. Yeah, there's an adventure in journaling in a different language, which is really interesting, especially when one comes from trauma. I think that journaling in a different language allowed me to discuss my trauma in a way and hopefully make something of use from it. Not that it needs to be done, but it helped me process it, which is part of what I found value of. What I peculiarly have in my journals, which I'm told is unusual, is that they don't recollect events, usually. They recollect the way that I felt about events. And in hindsight, I think that that was because I couldn't risk people around me, even within my family, to find my journals and understand how I was feeling or thinking about events happening. So talking in an abstract way about my emotions, about events, was something that I had to do to keep me safe, basically. So yeah, that's why my natural practice is how do we transform events into emotion, and then hopefully the entire point of sharing this is that like every piece will come with journal prompts for then for you to consider in your own life. We'll get there in a second. But yeah, the idea is we might not share all the same life experiences. Like I come from a lot of marginalizations, maybe you don't. But I'm pretty positive that on an emotional level, something that I have felt, you have felt as well in whatever kind of different situation you were. So what we're trying to do is going from events to emotions and trying to understand what is the common denominator there that hopefully will spring understanding, empathy, and solidarity. To be completely honest with you, when I applied for this is my first artist commission. And when I applied for it, it was a peculiar situation. I pitched myself, which I don't necessarily encourage anybody to do, because the moment that you pitch yourself and you are actually told yes, it means that your entire identity becomes something that you feel it's under the lens. At the same time, I also believe that if you come from any kind of marginalization, you don't have the luxury to afford imposter syndrome, because the world is going to be there daily to remind you that you're not worth of space, of voice, and all those kind of things. So as marginalized people, we sort of have to, stand up for ourselves, even if it seems like what we do is not worth. And also there's this value that society puts into not gloating and, being very mindful and very demure and basically not blow your own trumpet. Yeah, that usually is an invitation for anybody that is not a cis white het able man. And I think it was worth mentioning because I've had a lot of self-doubt myself about this, because this is the first practice that I do that doesn't have a crutch. Like we're talking about stuff that happened to me and how I interpreted it. And hopefully in giving you then the journal prompts, there's something of my experience that can give you an excuse for reflection as well. That being said, agenda, yes, we're going to go through 4 pieces that I've written between 2002 and 2023. No, and 2024, sorry. And there's something recent. And basically, I'm going to read you the piece, which is most of the time a spoken word or meant for spoken word. Sometimes are just pieces from my journal. Some of them are more peculiar. I'll get to them when we get to them. Content warnings again for the first one, which is the constant guest, which also gives the title to this workshop, is fatphobia, racism, and eating disorders. There's also ableism, to be honest with you. The second one is blood, marrow, and DNA, child abuse there. There aren't quite content warnings for the last 2. And slightly different from how probably you were told when you registered for this. After instead of having a 5-minute interruption in the middle, what is going to happen is that once I read your piece and basically I'll tell you the actual story of events behind it so that you can see my process going from this happened and this is how I translated it in talking about emotions. And then after that, there's going to be journal prompts just for you in general, based on the topic of every piece that I'll read to you. And you'll have 5 minutes to go to journal prompts that I'll share. Those are for you. Like, you don't need to share them with us. If you want to, more than welcome to like raise your hand, and it would be lovely to interact so that I don't talk at you, but we can share something. But absolutely, it's not something like the journal prompts are for you. It's something that hopefully you don't just spend 2 hours listening to me talking about myself and my life, but hopefully something that allows you to bring home something and self-reflection. And maybe if you want to get into writing, journaling, and maybe spoken word and maybe poetry, that could be what gets you there, or maybe gives you a little bit of a push there. Without any further ado, I'm going to start and read to you the constant guest, which you can also read because it's in this presentation. Good news is this is the longest bit. So after I get to the constant guest, everything else is downhill from there. The constant guest is a bit of a mammoth of a piece. So without any further ado, let's get into it. I've been writing down my thoughts since I was 12. Italy puts such a premium on language, it being the only form of elitism in a war between paupers for a country who managed to take down its own fragmented aristocracy only to have fascism and the cult of Mussolini to rise. I always thought of myself as someone who, given the right circumstances, would relish in the attention that artists are given on a stage or on Zoom. And so I took plunges in the depth of my mind to recount what I believe to be the beauty and tragedy of the challenges of life. A bit more challenging, perhaps, for not having the normal body, the regular accent, the plain name, or the generic look. But I still thought that was down to me. My difference as a fault I had to work on because I was the constant guest. Even in the country I was born into, even in the schools I gained the merit to attend, even in the village where the surname of my grandparents went as far back in records as to when we weren't Italy but France under Napoleon. But it was not my surname because despite being all the heritage that I knew, my mother couldn't risk giving me her surname. Only single, unmarried mothers do that. Of course, her reputation was worth more than the racism she exposed me to without a second thought. But I digress. I was given an invite to LiveJournal at a time where still you needed an invitation to join. What's more elite than that? Those days, people who met my thoughts before my body had the right reaction to me. The reaction I thought I was made to inspire. The beauty, the enchantment, the lure of an almost limitless imagination coupled with the eloquence only osmosis from autistic learning could bring. For a time, they called me gifted, the incomplete perfection. And they fed my vanity, deluded as I was to believe people could see me as I knew I was. My body never kept up. The collective imagery for someone like me said I should have been small, dainty, seasoned white, gaunt, pale, translucent even, with skin draped on bones so exquisitely the gracefulness should have exuded out of me like a last breath. The most celebrated writer in Italian history said beauty excels in death. Any ounce of fat took away from my brain, my words. My being and existence invalidated because I couldn't live up to that depiction. Decided, likely, by a white cis-het fashion photographer who sexually harassed these models, too weak to fight, back when the request is starvation. And starvation is a demand for obedience, not size. The incongruence of my brain and my body made boys travel hundreds of miles to meet me, to run away in disgust. Multiple times. Oh. And if I managed to have the presumption to think my value as a person wasn't affected by that, my wariness had to grow for survival, for readiness of acceptance when it happened again and again and again. My fault for disappointing them when such an exquisite mind was found hosted in such a disgusting body. When I started to inadvertently become more popular by looking into a camera and talk about what mattered to me, of course I didn't think. Despite the body, there was the light, the angle, the natural way people interact when they care, when something has already sparked recognition, therefore appreciation, not tolerance. That, despite having written for so long, is the only way I know how to order my thoughts. I never thought with confidence there could be value in them before Anais Nin. Then I recognized their narcissism, and the terror of becoming like my executioners kept me away from ever seeking legitimization that was beyond anonymous recollection of thoughts. I never counted myself as a writer, but writing is the longest, unstructured instinct that still gives meaning to my existence. And it still reminded me of the me I used to meet in my head and vomit out, typing in the ways I think about myself inside of myself. Spoken word I did the first time, and I had to realize I don't know how to reconcile the need for recognition with the requirement of performance in front of people who are not already invested into recognition, who are indeed seeing the body at the same time they hear the mind. And that made people run away after hundreds of miles. The body is an impediment to the gracefulness I fancy my brain having. The only such part likely given to the body I was given. Along with that, of all the performances and time spent with people who wanted to meet me from the cat's out of me they found, it never had to be me. The me that answers to I when I think. The spoken word is my brain in words, like here, refusing structure or rules. Because if I try to think how it better sounds in structure, I lose the voice that I am merely transcribing down. Spoken word is me. Any reaction to it, it's a reaction to the person I am, upon which I have no doubt, but that still needs to live in the world as an animal condemned to gregariousness. I don't fear being booed as much as I fear being the act people go to the bar to. And this is the first time my name is on the bill. But you cannot know what I'm going to bring. So there is no already found recognition. And the rejection, the boredom is for me, if it's there. It's me, the voice that answers to I, that dictates this, that has begged for a place in the world where they fit the way she feels for too many decades to count now, and yet has not moved past the 12-year-old that started. I am tired of hoping to find kindred spirits and ending up questioning my shape based on the reaction of others. I'm tired of feeling like a guest. That was it. Again, if it's of any consolation, that's as long as it's going to get. Yeah, let's talk about what was behind this. As it sort of mentions here and there, that was actually a piece that I wrote ad hoc for a spoken night, a glittery night, which was in April of 2023. It was one of the first times that I performed, and when I was told that I was given like 10 minutes, I was going back through my journals, trying to find something, and then I realized that the simple fact that I had anxiety, that maybe was worth talking about and asking myself why do I have this anxiety and all of that. Before going into how I moved from the events to the description of emotion, if it's such a thing, one of the main points that the cost and guest made me realize is that the way that I analyze things to then try and grow needs to be a mix between self and societal criticism. So much as there are things that I question about myself, and I was like, oh, would life have been better? Would life have been easier for how culture is, if my body looked different, if my accent didn't sound as it sounds? It's all those kind of things. What could I have done? You know, the kind of question that we ask ourselves about, if life is hard for me, what can I do to improve it? And usually in anything that is particularly self-reflective or intimist, we always think that it's about me, it's about what I have control over, and how do I have not control over myself. But it also needs to be considered in a societal context, which we are in, and there's a system, and there's a cultural standard, which we are inserted into. And if there are systemic issues, self-punishment over the fact that the issue is not being fat. The issue is there's a culture and system that have demonized that, and therefore people feel free to take a moral judgment on that. And so how the way that culture have put the fault of fatness or even race onto people, it's actually due to, well, society has decided to take a bad perspective on it. But instead, we need to readdress the responsibility, and the responsibility most of the time is in a society that needs a ladder to oppress people. Which is the reason why a couple of things that I mentioned in the cost and guest are literature and verifiable. The part where I talk about the demand for starvation is a demand for obedience and not size, that's actually from, paraphrased, but from The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf, which has written recently questionable things, but The Beauty Myth is still a relatively valid book from the 90s. And the most celebrated Italian writer that genuinely said, beauty will excel in that for women. So the skinnier they are, the more beautiful they are. And such beauty then therefore excels in that. It's Gabriele D'Annunzio, who to this day is considered, if not the greatest Italian writer, the second best after Dante of Divine Comedy fame. He's also the father of fascism. He inspired Mussolini. Italy doesn't have a critical take on him. He is still revered. You do not dare speak against the nuncio critically in Italy and think that you're not going to get heckled. It's not something you can afford to do, to the point that even growing up in Italy, the first time that I met critical work and description of how misogynistic and sexist and fascist the nuncio was, it's actually in this book by Stephen Gandel, which is called Bellissima, which is about the beauty standard of Italy. And it was incredibly fascinating to me to see critical thinking applied, not from the perspective of someone that is born and raised in Italy, because the kind of culture, once you are born and raised in the kind of culture, that is normal. And hearing someone from the outside saying, oh no, this is incredibly sexist, validated the feeling that I had about generic culture, because there's so much still today in Italian culture, in media, in the concept of beauty, that comes from the work of the nuncio. Because again, we still name schools after him, we name streets after him, and there's never been a critique of the way that his work has affected Italian culture and society. So that was that citation, sort of. So the way that I personally then went from, oh, I have this anxiety about, I have to do spoken word and I have to talk about myself. That's the reason why I wrote this piece. How did I go from that anxiety? What are the questions basically that I asked myself to then try and write something that had meaning or that could tell people something about me and the way that my brain works? Clearly, there was a lot of fear in talking about myself, pretty much like here. I try to understand, well, where does the fear come from? It comes from rejection, very clearly. Okay, what was the rejection in the past that made it hard and made me not want to go through that again? Where did that rejection come from? Was it from a person? Was it systemic? Was it normal, you know? And then there's the point that I mentioned before, like, could I have done something to avoid that rejection? Was there a part of me that I could have worked on to then go out in the world and not fear the rejection that I talk about in The Constant Guest? You know, boys talking to me online and being so enchanted in whatever kind of concept I would express, I guess. I don't remember, it's a long time ago. But yeah, that's actually the thing. Transforming events to emotions. A lot of my older stuff, I won't be able to tell you now what the story was behind that. I can completely remember the way that I felt because I wrote it down and then it feels like it resonates, but I wouldn't be able to tell you the event. And again, the fact that I don't actually report events in my journals, I think ultimately has to do with how I needed to keep myself safe because yeah, my household wasn't a safe place, and I didn't leave until I was 18. So there was a carefulness that I had to have there about how do I work through what I feel and my issues, also keeping myself safe, knowing that my stuff and my journals will be accessible if anybody wants to look for them, basically. And along with what could I have done of changing myself, which is not necessarily as much, because if the world and society wants to find a way to take it against you, believe me, you very hardly will be one of the good ones, but it's a story that we tell each other. And therefore, the next step becomes, if the issue is systemic, is there something I can do to affect that kind of change? And that is the reason why I haven't always done it, but especially in the last few years, since I've taken my practice as an artist's practice rather than me just keeping journals, there is a lot of self-analysis, but also societal criticism, because if people haven't thought about it before, because, you know, again, as I mentioned, I'm dyslexic, reading takes a lot of energy. Maybe it's the same for other people, but it doesn't take much for someone to either spend 2 hours here or see me perform at a spoken word night, and they think they're just doing something entertaining, but suddenly a line like the one about starvation is a demand for obedience, not size. Maybe sparks something in them. Maybe they want to look more into that. That is personally how I saw if there is a systemic issue, sprinkling this here and there helps and encourages people then to see what they can do to better the world themselves. And that being said, I've blabbered enough. These are the journal prompts for the constant guest, and it's about how do you fit in the world. So I'm sure that everybody has had times where you felt out of place. And if you felt out of place, why was that? Why did you feel like you didn't belong? Is it because expectations were put on you? Did you put expectations on yourself? If there's an uncomfortableness, where did that come from? In a perfect world where you could have changed the situation to suit you best, what would you have changed? And most importantly, to understand how our brain works on self-criticism, if you could have changed something about yourself that wouldn't have put you into embarrassment or under expectation, what would you have changed? And I'm gonna put 5 minutes on the timer. I'm starting to unmute just because we have like 30 seconds in general. I'll make you vaguely aware. Then about 20 seconds now, no, 15. I'm gonna start blubber again. And done, timed. Right. Shall we get into the second piece? The second piece is blood, marrow, and DNA. It's actually, I've got the date wrong. Blood, marrow, and DNA has been written as in a week ago. It's 17th of September 2024. It's not being written for this workshop, but it was very accidental that shit has happened in my life that required analysis. So I'm gonna, again, read you this first, and then I'm gonna tell you the story behind it a bit. Yeah, I've read it just once before today, so it's weird to read it out loud, but let's try that. I know she's trying her best to make me feel sticky again, like my body does not belong to me because she made it. I know I can't cord cut my blood, my marrow, my DNA away from hers. And yet it's not the miles I've put between us since I was 18 that serve as the blade. It's the precise order and choice on things. I wake up and see around the living room. They have meaning, and I can vacuum around them every time I choose. No stickiness. I can wash the dishes without fearing cockroaches crawling over me in the kitchen, in the bed, in the night, in the milk carton I'll never drink again directly from since I was 6. I know she wants me to cry. If she can't bend me, she will try to break. But what if she can't command my blood, my marrow, my DNA, just because at some point it was shared? I've lost the only thing she doesn't realize: fear. My spouse, my cats, the friends I could make in a place where they are not doing charity if they lower themselves to my level. The lower step of fat, the step lower of queer, lower autistic, one step lower still immigrant. The bottom step, you ungrateful child. No, I don't owe her my blood, my marrow, my DNA. And I know nothing in my body answers to her anymore. Nothing feels sticky and icky anymore. Nowhere she can put her sticky ends on. She doesn't get to stick to me anymore. I'm not an ungrateful child. I'm a free adult. Before I get into the explanation of this, if you've seen the posts that I've made on my account and on your face account to introduce this workshop, this was one of the posts. This was the last post. This is actually a literal entry from my journal of 2003. And I've included it because interestingly cathartic, but also triggering. I haven't gone back to my journal, especially when they are that old, that much. This is from 2003, so it's like 21 years ago. And something that shocked me in a way, reading these now with the knowledge and understanding that I have now about gaslighting, about abuse, parental abuse, child abuse, it was fascinating to me because I could read between the lines that the child that I was at the time knew that something was wrong, but also it made me very aware of how words were put in my mouth. And so there were things that my mother used to say and repeat about herself, like, she loves me more than anything, or she just lives for me. I don't use those kind of terms. Interestingly, probably because they are very codependent. And thankfully, I try to know better than that. But those terms are in this diary entry exactly because I kept hearing them from her. And so they just became part of my language. And that is how subtle brainwashing can be. I think the most impressive thing to me in this entry was that when I mentioned, oh, she really cares about me, she would like to know my mind, if only she could understand it, but we're so different. For a child to the understanding of the world of their mother and still trying to justify it, I mean, that's the reason why it comes with this picture, which to me it's brown face. Like, despite the fact that I am half Egyptian, putting me in a costume like that, it's brown face. It's a culture that I know nothing of, that I never was in Egypt. But my mother loved the idea of having this doll, this puppy that she could dress up. And I thought that it was very emblematic to put together, along with explaining, oh, well, how are we talking about child abuse? And the idea that we have child abuse, it's traffic, it's awful things. And maybe it can be. So that's the reason why I put this in contrast to the other piece that I wrote. Now, going more into it, ta-da! Yes, unsurprisingly, it's part of the way that I am trying to process and coming to terms with admitting that I'm a survivor of child abuse at the end of my mother. And something that actually surprised me, and it's sort of around the same time that I have seen, that I found this journal piece again. I don't know if any of you has seen the the last couple of years series of Interview with the Vampire. Well, something that surprised me there was the way that brainwashing is shown there is exactly that. Like, somebody keeps repeating you a thing, and then you start repeating it yourself. And watching that was the first time that I realized, oh, did I do the same? And then I found this piece of my old journals, and I was like, shit, yes, I did exactly the same. I repeated things that she kept saying about herself, saying, I'm amazing, I'm the best mother that you could possibly have in the world. I live for you. So, and I just started to repeat that. So yeah, writing this, and unsurprisingly, it goes so genetically into the repetition of fluids and parts that are inescapably connected with birth parents, that it's hard to detach from, and then you wonder, how do I detach if I'm still genetically half that person? Yeah, events to universal emotions. So this is in the last 8 years, I've come to the realization that I was a survivor of child abuse. It's not something that I can confront my mother with, someone that is still alive and still giving me grief to this day. The fact that I live abroad is very helpful. Is not absolutely stopping her from trying to damage me still. And recent events in the last couple of months also have gone into that direction. The fact that she keeps trying to keep me tethered to damage. If she doesn't do enough damage, she will try to make me pay for the consequences, because in the last year especially, I've gone completely no contact, having come to the realization that there's not only abuse, there's molestation in my past and all the kind of things. It was the most liberating thing that I ever done. Like understanding that now I don't need to pick up. And it's hard because culturally, what we are, it doesn't matter whether you do right or wrong. You are their child. You exist in this world because of them. They made you, and they can just as easily break you. So again, within a cultural context that tells you that, and you become the ungrateful child if you dare standing up for yourself, regardless of what's been done to you, it's challenging, even when it's unquestionably abusive. And also, again, the way that we see abuse sometimes is that we discount what the media hasn't shown us. And so if there's not violence with blood, it's not abuse. And no, that's absolutely not the case. Yeah, some of the questions that I had to ask myself was sometimes, why am I still sad about this? Because something to understand, I hope the whole of you have amazing relationship with your parents, first of all. But something to understand about going through the grief process of understanding, I'm not losing a parent. I've never actually had someone in a position that actually filled that role and that made me feel, loved and protected, unquestionably, and in a way that is not transactional. And without having ever lived that, there was still a grief process to go through when I started to realize what's been happening in my childhood. And I thought that I had processed, in a way, the loss of my mother as if she had died 8 years ago when all this stuff came to the surface. When I last received a letter from lawyers from all the damage that she's trying still to do to my name, I had a bout of sadness. And I was really surprised, because I was like, no, I've managed this. I've discussed this. I've been in therapy for longer than I can count to discuss this kind of things. How can I be sad about this? And then there was the point of then, well, then what becomes the right thing? What would be the right thing for me to happen, to feel that is fair now, that is just? Is there a justice that has to do with retribution? Is there a justice that has to do with just detachment and living and going on, basically? Oh boy, this wasn't easy to go through. But yeah, that's part of it. Let's go into journal prompts, because that's I really hope that that's easier for you than it is for me. In that picture, by the way, I'm 3 years old, and I'm saying it because people get really surprised when they hear that. Apparently, I looked much older than I was. Anyway, yeah, without necessarily going, and I really hope that nobody here has a first-hand experience of child abuse. I think that what my experience with abuse from a parental figure has taught me is the way that we think about authority, the way that we think that we owe respect. What is it based upon, and is there another way to look at it? So these are basically the thoughts that came from that piece, and then hopefully can give you some food for thought as well. So yeah, the journal prompts are literally like about the people that you look up to, but also the people that you feel like you owe respect. Why do you feel that that is? If you have respect for them, does it stem from admiration or gratefulness or even fear? And then there's the other way around. Like if you are in a position of authority, so if you've made a decision that affected someone else, what impact did your choice have on their life? So it's a point of self-reflection about your own authority. If you have authority over someone else, that's important to consider as well. And then, of course, there is a point about family, because, again, as I said before, culturally, relationships with relatives are mandatory. There's no questioning them. And so the first thought that came was, is the relationship that you have with your family, with your relatives, transactional? So, for example, indeed, I owe my parents for giving my life, or you think maybe that your children owe you respect because you're the adult. And if that's the case, are there any characteristics beyond blood, beyond this innate authority, and in a way, because it's innate privilege, that you can think of and you can respect them for, and that can earn you their respect in return, that is not just mandated by blood, by relationships. So with that, I will leave you to work on your journal, or again, go get a cup of tea. There we go. 5 minutes. Ooh, that was intense. Yeah, let's go to this. Fun fact: the date is like that because the copy from the PDF from Light Journal that I had from 2007 was kept like that. Yeah, I'm just gonna read it and I'm gonna then tell you the story behind it. This is called Thank Yous. It's literally just an entry from my journal from the 27th of September 2007, which I didn't realize we were so close to. Maybe I'll explain the story why. Yes. You couldn't have been luckier than this. There's nothing else in the world you could ask for. You're complete. For a brief moment in time, you've been perfect. Your life has been perfect. And I'm pretty sure this doesn't happen even once in a lifetime for most people. So be thankful as and more than you've always been. You're blessed by fate, trust it, and let it guide you. It never failed you to date. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the story behind it is, as you can imagine, a good story. However, this wasn't the first choice. This is what made me realize that part of my journals, even digital, have been lost. The piece that I meant to have here is connected to the one that we're going to have afterwards. And it was a sort of a similar gratitude kind of feeling that I had when I actually was rejected for a job. There was a time that I deluded myself into thinking that I could work in offices and grind and do what every holistic person does. And I thought that the fact that every month, couple of months, that I needed to disconnect and take a week off just to decompress in my room was completely normal. It wasn't. But the undiagnosed autism is which to try and understand. And also, because we live in late stage capitalism, the connection between value and work was all that had ever been taught to me. So yeah, there's a lot of that. This was actually a situation that was incredibly lucky and privileged. And the privilege there was that I was given a chance to be transferred to the UK. This is the reason why in 2007, I moved to London, because I was already extremely lucky in Italy. My first job, which was where I was at the time that I wrote this, was a paid internship, which is stupidly rare, at a music television channel, which, again, for the culture of Italy, if you think that there's nepotism here in the UK, you have no idea. There is, but in Italy is very known. You cannot get a job anywhere if you don't know someone there. I was the rarest, never before, never again. When I tell my story, I just sent my CV to human resources at then the company that I applied for. And somebody picked up my CV a few months later, told me about this internship. I did my interview and I got that job, which I felt incredibly blessed about and I was very grateful for. I knew how unlikely that was. When my contract was coming to an end after 6 months, I was given the option to stay and work in Milan and have my life in Italy as it was supposed to be. At the time, I had already lived for 2 years in Ireland, so I already knew that Italy wasn't exactly the best option for me, but it would have been a very privileged position to continue there. But I got also an interview with the same company, which for clarity, you might have seen it in the registration. I used to work in music. The company was MTV. I got an interview with MTV in the UK through a person that was working at MTV in Italy, but just because they let me know that there was the vacancy, not because they introduced me or anything, going with nepotism. There was none of that. And I got that job, but I didn't know until the answer that I needed to give about staying or going was asked of me. And so when I told them, well, then I'm going to wait for London to tell me. And if you want to withdraw your offer while I wait, then you can do that. And they did that. And for 2 days, and I remember incredibly, from the 25th to the 27th of September of 2007, I genuinely was like, have I completely fucked up my chances in getting a career here? I didn't, thankfully. The 27th of September is when I got a call from London saying, yeah, we'll help you transfer here. And I do understand how privileged is the idea that I could move to this country with a job already waiting for me, with a paying job already waiting for me. But to me, it's always been very important when something, I've had a few very lucky occurrences. I do wonder, looking back, if the luck was in the events. In this case, it was indeed, I don't question that. But there are a lot of other situations where I felt that lucky, that people would not necessarily consider as such. And one example would have been that entry that unfortunately I've lost, where it was just basically me saying very similar things to this post. But it was when I got a rejection letter for a job that I really wanted. And the way that basically I tried to move from the event to the emotions is, what is the kind of gratitude that I have for myself, for the way that I consider things, and for the way that I can still try and find a way to learn from things that are not considered going my way or being positive. And this is not about toxic positivity at all. This is just of, if this is what is presented in front of me, what can I make of it? And I've always been very focused on the learning, on the process of how do I push forward. At the time, I do not doubt that it was also very unhealthy in the way that I let the world make me believe that there was such a thing as a dream job, when in reality, who would dream in late stage capitalism of working? But it takes time. And when you are raised in a certain way and culture keeps telling you that, you try until you hit a wall. My wall personally was my need to have space for myself and not be constantly around people for 8 hours a day in an office. So yeah, the idea was asking myself why this seems important. Why am I grateful? Are there reasons to be grateful? Is what helped me learn and grow. I do not question, though, that situation was very, very lucky. And I remember that I wrote a piece saying thank you because of that. Is there anything else that I wanted to say about this bit? Not that it occurs to me. I feel like there's something missing, but we can just go on the gratitude bit. That's fine. Yes. Fun fact, the picture there is actually me leaving an offering. So, I mentioned at the beginning, I identify as a pagan witch. Well, that's me leaving a rose at the beach in Penarth, here in Cardiff. And it's part of my kind of gratitude kind of things. Yeah. The prompt is very simple. It's about what we are grateful for. And despite the fact that, again, that very specific entry was unquestionably, like, events-wise, a lucky and privileged occurrence. Again, because a very similar one was done when events were completely the opposites. The point that made me reflect was thinking about, what do we consider lucky or luck? If you could pick one lucky thing to happen to you tomorrow, what would it be? Stuff like the lottery and stuff. And then when we start to reflect more onto it and how it impacts every side of life, it would be interesting to see, would you still consider it lucky, considering the possible ramifications? My wife told me that these sound like the GCSE's prompt for English. If that's the case, I apologize. As you can tell, I haven't done that. I've done university here, but not long before this. I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. We didn't get this kind of prompts for essays or writing in Italy, but if it sounds very silly or patronizing, it genuinely doesn't mean to be apologies for that. It's a terrible day. It rains. You're feeling unwell. You're low on energy. Is there one thing or person whose presence could still improve your day? If so, reflect on the reasons why they can bring you such good feeling. I would go further and dare say, if that actually is a person, I would text them and say that they mean a lot to you. But gloating doesn't exist. Neither does modesty. No one needs to find out, so please blow your own trumpet. Think about what's something truly amazing about you, a talent, a skill, a unique perspective that you can apply to the world. Talk yourself up and bask in your amazingness, because I think we never do that often enough, especially going back to the beginning when I was talking about the self-doubt that we have. So yeah, I'm going to leave you with this for a moment. I'm going to put another 5 minutes on the timer. Right, last one. You've sustained a lot. Next, last. Okay, this is I think the tagline that I put to this in the description is "Bless the cringe," and I added this. This is not a journal entry. Believe it or not, this is part of an actual job application letter that I sent and that got me incredibly far in the hiring process that I was absolutely not qualified for. Um, I'm yes, this might use context beforehand. Indeed, it was for the position of deputy editor at Kerrang, the music magazine, the hard rock and metal and emo as well, to be honest, music magazine. And I wrote this, I sent this to people, and for whatever reason, they found me entertaining enough to actually let me go very far in the hiring process. This is actually the job that I didn't get, that I mentioned in the thank yous before. The moment that I received the letter saying no, I was able to write a piece that unfortunately is lost now, but that I remember. And I literally told myself, it's fine. A, fate has something in store for you, and so far it hasn't failed you, so why be doubtful now? But B, you know what you've learned from this. I was so far in the hiring process that I did shadowing for 2 weeks in the offices. So it's insane to me in hindsight that this kind of um, silliness being in team with what Donna mentioned allowed me to get there. I'll just read it to you. So in these final bits, let me get controversial bit out of the way. Yes, it might sound scandalous to consider a female, not even originally British, and with relatively irrelevant bylines, as the next deputy editor for Kerrang. But didn't just the thought of it make you feel tingly? There's potential for a perfect challenge to the status quo here. And as wild a card as I might seem, no chance taken by or on me as an uncertain resolution. You don't plunge into the unknown with me. No, the impossible is already happening right now. Because according to the rules, I should still be nowhere but in that 600 soul village still. And yet, I can be exhaustingly determined. I could tell you so many stories about these last 11,000 days, and they will all testify to the dreams I turned into plans and reached. But at the end of the day, it takes an accomplice, a believer to begin a revolution. I predict a riot, and I'm all in. Are you? I, I have a lot of love for past me. Bless the cringe indeed. It was indeed part of a real application letter that I sent to Kerrang. I found the letter of rejection, the email of rejection that I got at the time. It was dated the 14th of February, 2014. I was still extremely grateful for that because I think especially in hindsight, I realized I absolutely was not qualified for that job. The fact that they indulged me, taking me so far in the process, was already very flattering in a way. The person that they got for that job was someone that at the time had done so much work and was, I had worked for BBC before. And just the idea that I've gone down the process with a person with that experience, which I didn't really have, the simple fact that I could see the value in that is a reason why then I wrote the piece that is gratitude as well, but about not getting the job. What brings a person to be that level of daring and silly? That is a very authentic side of me. I do think that way. There was a fifth piece actually that should have been included in this that for time and self-analysis reasons wasn't added in the end. But it would have gone a bit into the discussion of how the eyes that I look at the world with about people, about institutions, about contexts, about anything really, can go with my autistic hyperfixation. I showed the way that I care in ways that the world finds bizarre. I know that, but it's also a very, very passionate way. Like I get all into things. And it's pretty much like the special kind of interest that you hear about autism. Yeah, that's me, and it can apply to anything or anyone. The reason why I had absolutely nothing to lose at the time was that it was my first brush with homelessness. And a few months prior, my partner and flatmates and co-worker at the time disappeared. They went away supposedly for a holiday, and then they just never came back and never replied. And all of a sudden, I was left in a house in Muswell Hill, so pricey London, to pay for both of our rents and our bills in a way that I couldn't sustain myself, of course, nor their expenses. And it was scary. It was the first time that I got to a place like that, and I didn't know that in sweet summer child, I had no idea that people got to that place. It grew. I'm not great at. I don't understand empathy a lot, but I understand sympathy a lot, and that experience definitely radicalized me a bit in understanding. Oh shit, this can really happen to everyone. You know what they say? You're much closer to the homeless person in the street than the billionaire. Oh, it's so true. It's so true. That was my first brush with homelessness. I've had two so far. So yeah, being in a position like that, at the time, yes, the idea of if I get this job, it's not only in the at the time all my work had been in music, in music and media. That was what my master was in. That was the experience that I had beforehand. So I in music you don't get a lot of transferable skills. That's something that I understood at the time. And seeing the possibility, the closer I was getting to this job, the more I was like, this might actually save my life. With a steady paycheck. At that point, I'd been freelancing for 3 years with my partner that left. We opened a production company that wasn't sustainable, and all of a sudden, finding myself in having to rely. Oh, I need someone to actually hire me again now. It was it was a weird situation in which, for some reason, I decided to lean into the fact of, listen, I already am here. I already have nothing to lose. I already will likely not have a roof over my head in a month. Whether I am honest with them and talk about the way that I care about this job, the way that I actually mean it, which might read similar to a love letter. And you don't write love letters to jobs or to companies. But at the time, that's the way that I was seeing things. And I was just very, very honest about it. And I understand how cringy that sounds, believe you me. But it was definitely an exercise in bravery or naivete, whichever. It can be two sides of the same coin. So the point literally became the way that I transform. I didn't transform much the events into emotions here, because it's literally something that was sent like that, very openly about a job application. But yeah, what I did there was basically, let's experiment with bravery when there's actually nothing to lose. Things cannot get worse. But something that experience also taught me was, if there is nothing to lose, doesn't mean that everything that I try to do can only get me something better. And it's one of the reasons why, to this day, I people see me as somewhat brave. I still say that there's a lot of naivety there, but I have very little fear, because when you have had a way to go down to understand what are your principles, what are the things that you really, really need, and how bad is it if you lose something else, um, it helps in that sense. The silver lining of that situation is I can be brave to be myself, because at this point I don't need there's not much that they can take from me. And basically it told me, once I am uncomfortable with something and I'm at my lowest, do I dig or do I start to crawl back up? So for the last prompts that I bring to you, the quote is from Zoo, the actual book, but it's also the last movie that I've seen of Cameron Crowe, that despite having invented the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope, used to have amazing quotes in his films. But again, I haven't watched past Zoo because, yeah, I don't. But I felt that the quote was really apt. Sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage, just literally 20 seconds of embarrassing bravery. So yeah, what would you do if you had nothing to lose? What's the part of you that you would allow to roam free, in a way? So the prompts are, what responsibilities in life feel like they are holding you back, in a way? If you had nothing to lose and knew that no action would impact your current lifestyle and your position in the community, what would you really want to do now? Talking about dignity and propriety and the way that we self-censor, what are the cornerstones of your perception of dignity and propriety, indeed? If you have a critical voice, which we all do, like see at the beginning for the self-doubt, what would the opposite of your self-critical voice say about you? So again, pump yourself up, a bit like the last journal prompt. Let's define embarrassing. So what's the most embarrassing thing that you can think of doing? And after you've thought about that, sit a bit in the cringe, very bad feeling of, oh my gosh, what, I don't even want to think about what the consequences are. But if you do, and you think about the consequences in a day, and then in a week, and then in a year, how much that embarrassing thing affects your life then? I'll just leave these with you, and I'll see you for the conclusions in another 5 minutes. I remembered what I wanted to say at the point of the previous piece about thank yous. The point about seeing myself as lucky still endures, even though I'm very aware that when I give details of my life, like I'm a disabled, autistic, queer immigrant of color, and I rely on welfare because along with autism, long COVID, 5 minutes, long COVID left me permanently disabled, like even for the kind of jobs that I could do before. And I understand, and I had unsafe housing situations before, my childhood, and the lack of parental presence, of valid parental presence. So I understand all those things. Some people show sympathy, some people describe it as tragedy. Very rarely I've actually got comments that I realized were powerful. One recently, when I spoke about the way my parents let me down, was surprisingly, instead of being sympathy, it was just telling me, "Oh, I'm in awe of your power and the way that you raise yourself." And I never realized before that's the kind of thing that I never heard before, but that really made me feel powerful rather than I'm sorry for you, which is great, still as sympathy. But I've learned that recently, and so I wanted to share in case of that. I still consider myself an extremely lucky person. If I consider where I would have been now, given the premise, given where I was born, given what was expected of me, and the possibilities that I was supposed to have had, I wouldn't have got as old as I am. And keeping that in mind never makes me fail for 1 second. Like even when I have trouble with, I don't know, feeling my universal credit and worrying and stuff like that, that is still better and luckier than I would think the expected life of me would have got me to. So that helps. Genuinely finding Finding Beauty in Negative Spaces, which is also the title of a Cedar album from 2008. Speaking of kerrang and stuff, right, let's get to the end of this. Why do I do this? Why did I have the bizarre idea that what I have been writing in the last 2.5 decades is for any reason valuable, and why would I share it with people? Fun fact, also I didn't mention it at the beginning, I have always, since LiveJournal, so since 2002, I have always been very careful about sharing my journals on platforms that allowed people to read them, being very, very careful about never mixing my identity, so the person that I am here, that works with glitter and all of that, with my diaries. My idea has always been, if I share what I think and the person that I am, and someone finds it and it resonates with them, they will actually like me for the person that I really am. And if they don't, I don't risk being attacked or stalked. But I've always had, it was never meant for anybody to read it, but it was always sent out as this sort of message in a bottle, and see if it gives thing. And I always say it at spoken word nights as well, is if any of these resonate with you, come talk to me after. Maybe we can be friends. That remains. Realistically, in everything that I've ever done and shared, which spans a long time by now, because especially, as I mentioned before, I'm a content creator. I do weekly videos on YouTube, and I've always had this thing about sharing, but I'm not very good socially because of my autism in 3D life. So sharing content has become a very great way for me to feed this need of connection that I don't have a great time otherwise in managing. And also the quote of Oscar Wilde is true: give a man a mask and they will tell you the truth. Not so much because I would lie otherwise, but because I know how frightening sometimes it is to be vulnerable and to talk about some of the things that I've talked about tonight. So yeah, the reason why I do it usually is if for any reason this resonates, I might have found my people, I might have found my kindred spirits, so it's worth sharing this beacon first. I also tendentially always write with, they say that a writer needs to have an ideal reader in their mind, and my ideal reader is 12-year-old Alisha. And I keep thinking of if they had known about things that I know in life now, would have made life not as hard, or would have allowed them to skip some of the mistakes that they did. And the idea is always that if there's someone lost in a 600 people village, or that shares any of my marginalization or experiences that might find useful, knowing that I've gone through shit and I've made these out of it, and maybe learning from my mistakes allows you to avoid them. So that's one of the main drives of anything that I do in life. Realistically, when I was working in music, that was the same thing. I went to my first gig when I was 12 and changed my life, made me realize that there was a world outside of my village, and that's what gave me the propulsion to then try and get more from life than what was expected of me. And the reason why I worked at the World in Music was like, what if there's someone lost in a village that needs this music to reach them, to make them realize there's more? So that's always been the same thing. To not be confused with the fact that I'm completely doing this selflessly. My moon is in Aries in my 10th house, and I need recognition. So the fact that I was also writing my journals on LiveJournal, more recently on WordPress, same thing. People don't know that I am me. But I like the idea that somebody can recognize something that I share as something that they have as well. And being recognized in a positive way is, oh my God, like I'm the same. Sort of helps me reclaim part of the humanity that society and culture told me constantly, being fat, queer, non-binary, neurodivergent, and an immigrant and a person of color, I wasn't entitled to, and humanity we should be entitled to, but we're not. So that kind of recognition with similar people kind of gives me that. So the last thing that I can leave you with is, if you want to connect with others, if you're thinking about taking these journal prompts and trying to do journaling, that becomes poetry, that becomes spoken word, that becomes any kind of artistic thing that you put out in the world, why would you do it? Why do you want to connect with people? What's your reason for that? And usually finding the why then helps shape the entire work and the entire way that you work with the stuff that then you want to represent to the world.